You guys can tell me. Okay, I think we're live now. Woo! This was my pick. Today, I don't know, should we do introductions? Because I feel like we always forget to like tell people who the hell we are. I don't care that much though. If you're watching this, you know who we are. Go look at an old video. We explain all those things. Talia, you're upside down. Well, you're sideways. You're sideways now.
Just a sec.
Okay, but I'm Care, Alexi,
Sidel, Bree,
and the sideways one is Talia. I don't know what's up with you right now. If I'm not mistaken, I think we all use she, her pronouns. So, you know, and if you're watching, tell us how you felt about this book in the chat, whatever you're watching on, whether it's YouTube or Twitch or Facebook, wherever you're watching. Tell us how you felt about this book. I don't know about Ollie, but I actually really love this book. Full disclosure, because so before we actually started, somebody commented and said this book is a masterpiece. Like in the middle of the night, at like midnight tonight, somebody said this. I don't know who this person is, but I am inclined to agree with you. And now my mom is here. My mom says hi. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
So today we have read, I believe it's Nghi Vo. I asked a few people and I did a lot of YouTubing to find the correct pronunciation and Googling, and it's Nghi Vo, I think. If I get that wrong and you see this.
At the end of the audio book.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I need to start depending on the audiobook for this shit because I don't audiobook. So
the audiobook helped me so much with Ray Bearer.
Yeah, I remember you said that. All right. So I'm gonna read. So the book is called The Chosen and the Beautiful, and it is a Gatsby retelling. The Great Gatsby, if I am not mistaken, I think last year or perhaps early this year. I think it was last year. I think last year it went into the public domain finally. And my cat is yelling, and if you'll hear my cat yelling at me, I apologize in advance. She's very rude.
I think the cat has opinions because
she probably. So this is a Great Gatsby retelling, and I, if I'm not mistaken, it was basically just sitting on the presses waiting for it to come into the public domain, because it released and started getting hyped like right after. Like the day that this was released into the public domain, like the day right after that, it was just like, guess what? And I get it because this is Nghi Vo is a fantastic writer. I don't know if you all have read any of her other work, her short stories, her novellas. Beautiful, absolutely beautifully written, incredible pieces of work by this writer. Like I aspire to this level of lyric, and so that's why I chose this book. Also because I find that my reading these days is lagging like anywhere from 2 to 5 years behind because I wait for books to go on sale because I live in the global south, and that means that I'm functionally poor in American dollars. So I wait for things. And so I wait for things to go. No, really. Like I think I have a fairly comfortable lifestyle earning what I earn here now. But let's be real, if I were earning what I earn now and living in the US, Bree's back.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. If I were earning that and living in the US, I'd be well below the poverty line. So buying brand new books at like $14 and $15, even on Amazon, for like the ebook, not for me. Not for me at all.
Same.
I can't afford it. So yeah, because I've been
donations though, but
yeah, I have a wish list. If anybody would like access to my wish list, I could send you the link. You can send me books. I'm okay with it. But that's where we're at. So I put this book on our club list because it came out earlier this month. I think the release date was the 6th of June. So it just came out this month. And so it was a great excuse for me to spend the extra dollars on a book for book club. And I am very pleased with it. So, you know, before I continue to ramble and before this gets totally off track, I'm going to read the thingamabob, the thingy-majiggy, the blurb, that's it, the blurb, for this book, Olia. I'm going to read the blurb for this book. So it goes, immigrant, socialite, magician, Jordan Baker grows up in the most rarefied circle, or rarefied. Why am I not wordsing right now? The most rarefied circles of 1920s American society. She has money, education, a killer golf handicap, and invitations to some of the most exclusive parties of the jazz age. She's also queer and Asian, a Vietnamese adoptee treated as an exotic attraction by her peers, while the most important doors remain closed to her. But the world is full of wonders, infernal pacts and dazzling illusions, lost ghosts and elemental mysteries. In all paper is fire. In all paper is fire. In all paper is fire, and Jordan can burn the cut paper heart out of a man. She just has to learn how.
Side out. Me and Side out are making eye contact right now.
Nghi Vo's debut novel, The Chosen and the Beautiful, reinvents this classic of the American canon as a coming-of-age story full of magic, mystery, and glittering excess, and introduces a major new literary voice. So, I think I agree and disagree that this is a new literary voice, because I think Vo's work has been around for quite some time. Not in the novel, I will say not. I think this is, of course, her debut novel, but she's got a ton of short stories out there dating over 10 years. She's been writing stories and works for more than 10 years. I think if you look at her bibliography online, the earliest story is from 2005. And then there's, it's fairly consistent, until up to 2019. Then she's got some novellas that I think both came out last year. If I'm not mistaken, they're both from Tor.com. And then this novel, The Chosen and the Beautiful, which is her debut novel, if not her debut piece of writing, because she just does have the novellas. And there are two more pieces of work from her, long pieces of work from her. Into the Riverlands is a novella coming out in 2022. And Siren Queen is coming out in 2022, which is also a novel. Clearly, I am a fan. Here I am with this lady's whole bibliography, in front of my face.
I'm surprised
it was my pick, so I should go first, right?
Exactly.
Crap. I'm not used to it, right? I'm used to being okay, well, it was your pick today, Bree, Talia, whatever, you go first. Okay, so it was my pick. As I mentioned earlier, I did choose this book. One, I was very excited about it, this debut novel. Obviously, I was very excited about it. Two, it was a way for me to justify the expense of buying a brand new book that just released this month. So
you deserved it.
I did deserve it,
Yes.
damn it.
You deserve it.
So I was really excited to read this. Ironically, despite all my excitement to read it, I got to 90% of the book and didn't manage to finish it before today. But that's mostly life crap getting in the way and less excitement to read it. And it reflects a lot more on how crazy my life has been these last 2 weeks. Then I think it really reflects on the quality of the book. Because I don't know about Olia, but I think that we can agree that this book was actually really fantastic. I think for the first half, I was like, man, even Vo's writing is making Great Gatsby, it's still not, Great Gatsby was a 5 at best in my book, because I think hey, Shayna has arrived. Okay. Hey, Shay, welcome.
Hey.
Hi.
I see that you've joined from I don't know, what are you just chilling outside? Is that what's up?
Yeah, chilling outside. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can.
You're,
All right,
you're pretty
cool.
good.
Just
You're good,
making
you're good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm out in Colorado, my parents' house, hanging out for Father's Day.
Nice. I haven't called my dad yet, because I know that if I call him, we're going to sit on the phone for 2 hours, and I was trying to finish that book, so didn't happen yet. I'll call him after, though. I'll call him tonight.
We went out to Lake Nighthorse near Durango, Colorado, and was out swimming in the lake all afternoon yesterday, and I'm exhausted, but I still got back and stayed up all night to finish the book. So I'm here.
Woo! And that's such a great irony, because the person who chose the book didn't finish it. Again, like I said, not a reflection on the book at all. Totally a reflection on the madness of my life. So what I was saying is that at first I was okay, so The Great Gatsby. I was never into The Great Gatsby. Mummy says hi, Shayna. I was never a fan of The Great Gatsby in large part because I think of its age, and what people enjoyed and saw as brilliant writing back then. I don't necessarily see as brilliant writing anymore. I mean, I certainly appreciate that it was good, like for when it was
Then.
good. But
Yeah.
but it's just not for me, I think, today. But also because of the perspective, it feels, looking back, and I remember, and I know I mentioned this to you all before, I remember very little about The Great Gatsby, the book. I actually remember very little about that book. It's just one of those books that just for my brain was not the most memorable thing, you know? It was like, yeah, it has all of these like hallmarks of things that make books good enough to get into schools. But like, that's marketing as much as it is writing. Yeah. That's definitely marketing as much as writing. And I definitely remember also feeling like it had some very serious men writing women moments in the original.
Yeah.
If I recall
We'll
correctly.
get to that. We'll get to that because I have feelings. I have lots
Right,
of feelings
so-
because I hate the original author.
Great. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. I do remember. I do remember you talking about that. So at any rate, I was really excited for this retelling because if I also recall correctly, I think Vo identifies as queer too, and it's not just that the character that Jordan is queer and Asian. The use of language, my mummy says that the use of language doesn't resonate with today's language and context. That's true. That's true. But I mean, this was also true 10 years ago or more when I first, it's more than, because I'm in my 30s, so like 15 years ago, when I first picked up Great Gatsby to like attempt to read it. Anyway, so for the first half, I remember thinking, God, even Vo can't make this book better than it was, because I still felt like I enjoyed her writing, I enjoyed her use of language, and I enjoyed the fantastical twist and the new perspective that she was bringing to it. But the content was still very much the same content that we had in a lot of the original Great Gatsby, from what I remembered.
Mhm.
And I was just like, a lot of this, like, there were these gems. There were these like brilliant gems of, ooh, this is new. I like this. This is nice. And then it was like, blah, 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 blah. Really well written, blah, blah, blah. But then I think after I crossed that like 40 to 50% mark, I was like, give me more. So that's like my smushing together of my like basic thoughts of the book. And again, full disclosure, due to many like dumb life things over the last 2 weeks, I only managed to get 90% of the way through this book. So the end I haven't actually read the end, but I'm totally open to spoilers because I honestly think that this book is not going to be spoiled for me. I think I'm going to read the end even after you tell me what the end was and still enjoy it because she's a fantastic writer.
It's yummy.
I'm thinking of just not. I'm thinking of just not spoiling the last few pages for you.
Just tell
Like,
me.
just
I don't
not.
care. I'm excited. I want to know. I don't want to take.
I love the
No.
last few pages. It's
Yeah, but I think you love the last few pages because she's a fantastic writer.
You know
not
what?
Because
You
the
know-
content is different.
You know,
No,
let's decide.
no.
Let's decide when we get there. Let's decide when
Yeah.
we get there. What we do.
Fine.
yeah, okay.
Fine.
All right.
Okay. So that's me. That's my 2 cents for now. Somebody else tell me how you felt about the book. What did you think? What did you like?
Can I go?
Yeah, go. Yeah.
It was delicious is how I want to describe it. The writing and the words, it's like the words is like I listen on audio. It's like as I listened to them, they slid through my ears like droplets of demoniac, like yummy. And I hate that word. I hate the word yummy, but I'm using it for this book because the language was yummy. It was a treat. And I remember you ladies saying when you all read, I believe it was my book, The Space Between Worlds, you're like, oh, it made me feel like very like I can't write like this, whatever. This one did it for me. I'm listening to her language and I'm like, oh my God, can I create words this beautiful? I don't know.
It's so lyrical.
I don't
it's
know,
so
yeah.
smooth
Yeah.
and lyrical, and all of her work is like this.
So now I need to read more of her work because
Yeah,
telling you,
that's
all
how
of her
I
work
feel.
is like this.
And then just my thoughts as far as Gatsby, I again, it was set in the the 20s, the Roaring 20s, so there were going to be some themes that remain from F. Scott Fitzgerald. But there were some nice, beautiful little things that we'll talk about that I thought were scattered in there. But I love Jordan. I love that she gave a fresh voice, and I love that it was from the female perspective, because there was one line in particular where she's talking and she says, men don't realize the space that they take. And I was like, yes, like when she said that with her voice, and it's like, yes, we're finally getting this from a female perspective. Like, we're still in a man's world, but at least we can see her trying to take space in this man's world. So I really enjoyed that line. And there's another one I liked, but we'll talk about it later. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Okay. Who wants to go next?
I could go next. I know who this book was based on. Right? This book was based on the original. I will go with the original Legend of Zelda. These were passages lifted directly from her diaries based on her friends, and then written by her husband, who became famous for it. But anyway, out of the 4 most well-known socialites, the Kardashians of the time, there was one who was a golfer, who was like the sportswoman. And Nghi wrote from that perspective, as if she were Daisy's friend. Because, you know, and you talk about the book being yummy and, you know, being able to write. I want to read this book 2 shots of tequila in. You know that feeling you get? Where just as it starts to warm you, and you're slightly numb, but you're still very hyper aware. And like everything just starts to look good, and you know that nice, like just there. And you mentioned, you know, the demoniac and so on, and I thought of like, you know, like she writes like she's on it, like that's the vibe you get as, and in speaking of that vibe and that writing and that beautiful lyricism, like 20 out of 10 would recommend.
Yeah, but I do wanna make a
Tiger
caveat
came
to
down
what you
from
said.
the mount. Tiger Came Down from the Mountain is in my TBR list. I finished this book 2:37 this afternoon. It's about an hour ago, less than an hour ago.
So I just want to say, I feel like I want to tweak a sentence that you just said. You said that she wrote it like she was on Demoniac.
Yeah.
I think she wrote it like we were on Demoniac. Because that feeling of smoothness suggests more to me that I was feeling languid. And like as I read and as I heard these words, or as these words crossed my consciousness.
Well, we read it like we were on Demoniac. She wrote it like if she was. So, you know, we could feel that.
But like the thing is, I feel like it's hard for me to ever say that somebody wrote it. Like when I think that somebody wrote something intoxicated, I normally feel like that's probably, they weren't like drunk. Maybe at
No, not drunk.
No,
Okay,
my mom
like
says,
I said,
gosh, Nicola, stop giving away all the things book lovers do in secret. Hashtag 2 tequilas in. No, I know what you mean.
I actually don't need tequila if the book is that good. So
yeah, like you don't need, you feel drunk reading this. It's that good.
I would say Nghi Vo was the magician. And
she wrote the book as Demoniac.
Yeah.
She
was demoniac.
That's it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was so smooth.
like
I have a friend. I wonder, can I? Okay, yeah, no. Her book announcement was made. Okay, so I have a friend, Mio. Mia, if you ever see this, I'm sorry. I'm spilling all your laundry and all your files out. All your tea is out in a while now. But I had the privilege of reading some of Mia's work. And I think Mia's work is equally lyrical. And when I was reading this again, because I don't think I've actually read anything from Vo in a little while. It's been a while since like I read read something from her. When I say a while, not like 10 years, but it's been a few months, right? I read this and I immediately thought of Mia's writing again, or rather, I guess when I first read Mia's writing, I thought of that, and then again I read this, and of course I thought of Mia, and that's Mia. I'm grown up now. She wants to be Angeli and not Kay's mom. Well, okay, I'll just call you Angeli. What do you ask? You could have just asked.
And she's my mom too.
But as you say, everybody's called she moms, right?
Mom.
So
Exactly.
I don't know what she wants. I don't think she like everybody calling she moms. I don't think she like
Angeli's my best friend.
Exactly,
Yeah. Everybody adopts. Everyone is now adopted by Angeli. Okay, fine. I'll stick to Angeli. What What was I saying? Shit. All right.
Mia,
So this
you're
this
talking
like
about
blending.
Mia's writing.
Yes, I was talking about Mia's. And I think Mia also writes like that, like kind of. She has that level of lyricism, and I remember that same feeling, like that liquid feeling, right? You feel like you're like you're experiencing something that's smooth, like a smooth liquid, like honey or something even more intoxicating than that. And I feel like something that both Shayna and Nicola, but both Shayna and Nicola call me Angeli. Okay. But I feel like that difference, like having experienced these two forms of lyricism the way I have now, I feel the need, and this might just be a me thing, but I feel like this need to sort of distinguish that one lyricism from the other kind of lyricism. And one is like water smooth, and the other one is like alcohol smooth. And I don't know that I honestly know which is which. That's kind of how I feel right now.
Well, do you feel nourished or do you feel intoxicated?
I'm gonna have to think about that, but that is, you're right. That is the way why not both?
Why not both?
Why not?
It's like watered down whiskey. You know, it's kind of that.
It's a vodka soda. It's all the rage in New York. Yeah, you get hydrated and you get drunk.
Right.
And of course, the dash of lemon for vitamin C.
Of course.
You know, I mean, you know, hashtag science, hashtag health.
Terrible and wonderful all at once.
I totally cut our thought process in half. Those, like Shayna and Seidel, you guys both need to, or you gals, you both time to share your own thoughts before we dive into like our favorite bits and our sticky bits and all the things that we loved and hated. Yeah, all the juice that we liked.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed this. So I felt similar to UK. First halfway through, I was like, this is just... So I've never read The Great Gatsby, disclaimer. I've only watched the film, and I did like a deep dive film analysis for a film course that I did at university. Cool. Reading this, I kept having those images in my mind. I was like, I know this story. Oh, this is going to be the same story. And then halfway through, I was like, oh, wait, no, I want to keep reading this. I need to know all of these things more. Tell me everything. And I had a similar kind of feeling of sort of like encradling in a sea of alcohol. And I don't drink, but that's what it felt like. Like I was in this little bassinet and just kind of like being rocked. And I was like, this is lovely. And even the audiobook form, it was just brilliant to listen to and have unfold in audio form. I can't imagine what it was like to read it. And then by the end, I was just, this was it. This is a good one. This is a good pick.
Yep.
Shayna, tell us.
My Wi-Fi is a little spotty, so I'm sorry if I lose connection or anything. But yeah, like I did like actually half and half. I actually bought the book this time and I got the audiobook. And I'm really glad I did that because there was no way I was going to finish it without that because I had to drive all the way up here. So the audiobook really helped. And I was really glad I got to listen to the audiobook for those, 8 hours or whatever. And because it like the reader like just did this really awesome job of just bringing the story to life. But yeah, I got lost in the words. I got lost in the story. I got lost in all of these just juicy little, tales and stories and everything. Because, we're talking about this last book where we had like whiplash, right? In the last book where we're going forward, we're going back, we're going forward and back. This one, you kind of had the same thing, but it was much smoother, much better transitions. You by the time you got to the end of a chapter that was kind of like a flashback, you kind of were brought back to like, oh, this is revealing like another detail of, why this or that happened. And I really loved, the retelling. I actually have read The Great Gatsby 4 times in the last 15 years. Because that's actually
you're a goddamn champ.
I really enjoy that book because it was something I hated the first time I read it in high school. And I had a really awesome, it's kind of funny, I hated him at the time, but I had a really awesome English teacher that had us read it. And he was obsessed with the green light at the very end of that, book. And it was kind of instilled in me to like, think all these things about the significance of the green light on the end of Daisy's dock. But then just the the way I kind of felt like a lot of the other details in the book, and rereading the book over the years has kind of enlightened me to a lot of things that have that were kind of like enveloped in Fitzgerald's telling of the story, that I was kind of like, yeah, there's elements here that are really good, and I can appreciate for what they are, but the way that this book is written, like The Chosen and the Beautiful, like the perspective of it and everything, it's so much better. It really is. It's just this wonderful treat, and it's just a vision of a period in time where it's supposed to be about the liberation of women. They're fresh off of getting the vote, and and this is kind of the liberation of of not just women, but like just the liberation of people in general. I kind of felt like, and she kind of turned it into something more. I really loved it.
Yeah. I think it's hard. I'll be honest and say that I think even if this book didn't have those layers and all it was just written as beautifully as it is, I'd still enjoy the hell out of it.
Yeah.
The use of the God,
it's like finding out something that you liked as a treat has nutritional benefits.
Yeah, that
Yes.
actually that makes
like
sense.
that.
Yes.
That's actually a great way to describe it. It was just so
Finding
so
out
smooth.
chocolates and wine has antioxidants, which are good for you. It's like,
Yeah, reading this book was a lot like consuming chocolate and really good wine.
yeah.
It's a lot
For
like
sure.
that. It was a very
sure.
pleasant experience.
I've written down like 2 or 3 times now since reading this book that I need to go research this corpse reviver and figure out how I can make my own version of it.
I was looking at a couple of the drinks. I recognized some, and I didn't recognize a couple of the others.
Yeah.
I kind of
So,
assume
yeah.
that some of them are not real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody out there has like their version
yeah.
of it that they've, gotten from the book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I liked the whole discussions with the suffragettes, and because she's a woman of color and so on, that she looks at it and she's already saying, okay, so this white feminism is not including me, because the same suffragettes that worked towards the vote, that were, that had all these other great, wonderful, lofty ideals, they were for the Exclusion Act.
The Manchester Act, I think.
Yeah.
It's called.
The Manchester, I couldn't remember the name of it. The Manchester Act. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, but these are, these are very modern conversations. But just because they're modern conversations doesn't mean that they are modern, thought processes. And for somebody, even though she was picked to be this modern exotic pet for them, right, it still affected her in ways she didn't know that it would affect her, and it would have affected the people that were like her. The only other people she saw that were like her were people that were treated as servants and people that were treated as lesser.
Yeah. And I think that it's important to note too that those conversations, we have the use of the word modern. Those are still modern conversations. How many spaces exist today where white feminism is really the thing that's being discussed, and it excludes ultimately not just people of color and women of color, right? So much of that white woman oriented feminism ultimately excludes groups or disenfranchised groups like people of color and women of color, and that's still a modern conversation. You're still gonna find spaces where white ladies get together and talk about their rights, and in that same breath, they'll advocate for the removal of rights of other people.
I have a friend a vehemently anti-feminist friend, who says that a lot of feminism is rooted in privilege. And
sorry, you have vehemently anti-feminist friends? This is
Yeah.
news to me. You?
I have vehemently because I'm listening to her, because she has the aspects of feminism that she doesn't like, and I'm seeing it from the lens of people who stereotype feminism the same way the author does to her aunt's friends. right? And I'm seeing it from that lens, and I'm also seeing like her own. She's speaking from her own experiences and so on, and she's not out there advocating or doing anything, to stop something from happening, but she is talking about it in her own space. And sometimes when somebody speaks of their own experiences, especially a woman being anti-feminist is one thing versus a man being anti-feminist, right? And she feels like being feminist is being antithetical to being a woman and being feminine. And it's like I'm examining that from her lens as well, from her perspective. And she is saying that, okay, this is what tradition was set up to do, and this is her culture and so on, and she's fine with these elements of it. And at the end of the day, what feminism should have been is about choice. And to me, it feels like, even though she says she's anti-feminist, when she says, this is how I want to live, this is the kind of relationship I want to have with my husband, my partner, I'm like, this is your choice. And to me, it would feel anti-feminist to be against that. You know what I mean? Against her personal choice.
I think that's not unusual. I do know, and I get what you're saying now. I don't think I understood what you meant at first. But I also have friends who, they'll say that they're not feminists, but all of the things that they really want and believe in are like feminist things, or things that
I think
feminism.
It all boils down to a misunderstanding of what the definition of feminism is, and what the pop culture definition of feminism is, and what the male definition of feminism is. It comes down to a misunderstanding of all of those things, and imposing those sort of muddled beliefs onto the truth of what feminism is meant to be.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
And I think that is why I didn't like the first Great Gatsby. Because I like the excessiveness, I like the glamour, I like the parties. When I first read Great Gatsby, because I was in my 20s, and maybe not at that financial level, but that was kind of my life at one point. The parties, the lyman, the friends, that kind of thing.
The cute mixed drinks.
Of course.
They make it out in the back. The hot and sweaty. Yeah.
That was your life at one point in time. And I would not want to begrudge it, especially now in a panini. I would love, I mix drinks. I have my own mixed drink with tequila. But,
Yeah,
so there's an excessiveness that I absolutely loved about it.
And I agree with that. Like, this is the girl who had a drink named after her, right? Like, this is not. I don't get to shade people who do this, and I never would. But like, that's actually one of the things I really loved about this book, is that I feel like all of that fancy of wealth that we get in the original Great Gatsby, this is all just speaking from memory, because like I said, I very barely remember the Great Gatsby at all, my original reading. And I only ever read it once, because it I had to. This was a spite read. I finished that book. You know how we've identified more than once, I think, in this book club, that I finished their books that I finished solely out of spite. This was one of those books. The original Great Gatsby was one of those books. This was not. This I intend, as soon as we hang up today, I'm going to finish the last 10% of this book.
And you will not. You will enjoy it.
I think that anything you'll tell me about the end, and I really hope you do, because this channel is all about spoilers, so you should goddamn spoil it.
We could spoil everything else.
Fine, we spoil everything. I did talk about it.
Yeah. But like, so the magic in this book it took all of that, because wealth, I don't know about Olia, but for me, wealth in itself is a fantasy. I'm a millennial, okay? A certain level of wealth is fantasy to me, right? There are millennials. Yeah, it is magic, right? And not even things like, I do think like for some millennials, something like having your own home and shit is a possibility, depending on where you live in the world, right? And what you have access to and what your opportunities are. But I do think for like 90% of us, that's never gonna happen, right? Especially if we want to live in a certain place, or we want to have a certain quality of lifestyle, or we want to we want to travel, things like that.
Yeah, owning property in New York
Yeah, exactly. No, not in New
Well,
York.
it's not a thing.
Never.
That happened.
You need the right like last name to own anything in New York, to be honest.
That's a thing in this book too, though, right? That right,
Yeah.
that having
Side
that right
out,
last
maybe
name.
Yeah.
we should go down to the financial district, find
Yeah.
ourselves some.
Let's see, like, and that's where like
So-
the native in me is like, let's start go reclaiming some land there. That'd be great. Let's do that.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I mean, I'm not native to any part that I know of in that region. But you know, I'll support this movement because I can come visit you. Anyway, so that idea,
And
that fantasy of wealth.
to be honest, that's the real agenda. There is visiting.
It's true. It's true. Absolutely.
Shh, don't tell anybody. Shh, keep it a secret.
It's okay. Only like 5 people watch this channel. We'll be fine. So the wealth of fantasy was kind of one level of fantasy, I think, in the original, right? This excess, the fantasy of excess that so many of us cannot afford. Even those of us who are well off, there's at a certain point, you know, you still can't engage in excess in those ways, right? So that's like the fantasy of excess, and then bringing the actual elements of magic into this and seeing what magic looked like in excess, right? Like the part where Daisy and Jordan are with Nick and getting a tour of Gatsby's house. This is the first time Daisy's entering the house, and they're like, there is a room that is Norway, and it's like, I'm sorry, let me read that again. And it's basically like the room is Norway, right? And you see, so like in the room, you're experiencing the climate and the weather. You know, well, the climate and the weather. Yes, yeah, that's rather. Yes, that's
The climate and weather, two different things, but
yeah, but they're close enough for you to understand what I mean with only using one of those words. Anyway, you experience, you know, the climate and the weather, and the sky. And everything as it is in Norway at that moment, or whatever it is. And I was just like, so these are all ways in which I think that the author helped us to understand what magic looked like in excess, and not just what magic looked like for normal people.
Well, because we saw a glimpse of it with the earth magic when she's on the train.
Right. And
like normal.
Yeah. And we don't actually see a lot of that, though. That's like one of the few moments that we see. There's this other place. What was the name of the club? Something Rillon or Llion, Carillion or something. Cerulean. That's it, the Cerulean. That was one of my favorite parts of this whole book, because it's like, this is the I'm here and I'm queer club. That's what that place was. And that was one of my favorite things. And it was a secret. And even in this world of like magic and fantasy, where wealth and magic go together to create this power and this excess, you still can't be queer.
But you know what I liked particularly about that club? So if you go and you use the wrong password, or you use the wrong, you're wearing the wrong flower of the day, you're not gonna get what you went there for. So you can be part of a space. You can be invited into a space and still be othered if you don't do the right. And I just thought, it's like, okay, this is for our people. Our people know who we are, and if you are worthy, you will step up and keep current with what belongs to us.
Exactly.
And I just loved it.
Just to interrupt, my mom says, sorry, Anjali says, I absolutely back the nations in reclaiming all of the Americas based on the First World's acceptance of Israel's claim of ancestral ownership.
I love you, Mom.
I love my mom starting fires all over the place. Over the place.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're going to bypass that fire to move on to the fires of this book. Specifically this book, because that is a conversation in itself that we could probably have for way more than 2 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
so sorry, Nicola, you were saying.
Yeah, I was talking about the club and of it, and like you can still, and I mean there were spaces in which she was accepted, like all of these, white spaces that she was accepted, but she wasn't able to access all of it. For example, her girlfriends wouldn't introduce her to their brothers. She wasn't told like, oh, there's a cousin that's going to be available to marry you. And yet still she was expected to get married without all the benefits that the other girls, the white girls that they had. They had people that were making connections for and on their behalf. You know, so somebody wanting to be with her, they had to overlook her obvious Asianness, you know. And she was clearly not the type that would have been satisfied with being married as a trophy. You know, she would have wanted something different, despite utilizing her exoticness, her exoticism. She utilized it, and she utilized it brilliantly. But she wanted more for herself, even if the author herself didn't see it that way, right? But she did see her own otherness, and I thought that the club kind of gave her that her life that her parents gave her didn't.
So I wanna extrapolate from that to talk about her feelings when she encountered other people who looked like her.
I was gonna say that because like that idea of token. So she lived in a world where she was a token, and that idea of tokenism, she was very much aware of it and used it much to her advantage to move through those spaces. But then when confronted with someone that bared same features as her and looked like her and was from the same people as her, that the nuance of that kind of experience was brilliantly explored for me, because it was just, it's so comforting to see and be and feel like you are home and like you are same, but it is also so othering. It is also so sickening and saddening sometimes when it's like you're no longer special, you're no longer the only one. And like her moving through some of that was just brilliant to hear, because I didn't read it, but was interesting to see and experience, because there is this and it's not talked about very often, but there is a specialness, a kind of badge that you do wear when you are a token. And you're aware that you're a token. It's true. You have a different kind of, you have a specific kind of privilege.
Yes.
And are seen in a very specific kind of way and are allowed to move around in a very specific kind of way and are acknowledged differently. Because you are special in those spaces. And then when that kind of thing that makes you special is now commonplace, how do you then define yourself? How do you then identify what
and
makes
not just
you
commonplace,
different?
but
I want to add another layer to that, because I think that tokenism, when you move into a space where you are no longer the token, where everybody else is like you, the fact that you do own that badge others you as well. Right? So you're always going to be straddling two different, and I felt like that, and maybe Anjali, not mom, can back me up here with some of this experience that I think she would have seen firsthand. She would have seen me experience growing up and going to school. So when I was going to school, I can't, let me cut across all of that long story and try my best to just get to the point, right? Because all I just talk for long. I'm a long-winded one. I'm one of those people. People always ask me where I'm from, even in Trinidad and Tobago, the country in which I was born and raised. Yeah, because I have an accent. I don't know what accent they mean. I am sure.
And you went to a convent?
I fucking didn't. Right?
Really? Sorry.
No.
Sorry.
She went to a prestige school.
Sorry.
I did go. I went to a prestige school. I shouldn't be using quotes. I guess it is called. It is a prestige school. I did. So I went to Bishop Anstey. For anybody who knows where or what that is.
Bishops?
You know how you can identify a bishop's girl? Just stay quiet. They go tell you.
Except clearly that didn't happen because Seidel didn't know.
I'm a bishop
to me.
I didn't know you. I really thought you went like convert. No.
Is he light skin?
Shade. I just
No. I'm telling you, is he light skin? Honest to God, I'm telling you, is he light skin?
Awesome.
I know, but I'm telling you, it's because I'm light skin and people just associate. Like, if you speak like me, but you're black,
you went bishops.
They will assume that you went bishops.
Yeah.
But because I'm not black, people assume that it wasn't bishops. It was. My mother also went to Bishops. It's a generational. We're generational bats.
I mean, it's like a
All
school.
right.
I read bats all the way.
Yeah, right.
I
Bats all the
mean,
way.
speaking of wearing badges.
Right.
Uh,
So anyway, but
oh
the
gosh.
the point that I was getting at though is that I went to primary school where so here I mean the Trinis know this, right? The whole top row of this conversation is already deeply aware that speech and social class are very deeply intertwined here, and that people who speak Trinidadian Creole just speak Trinidadian Creole naturally. This is the way that they engage with each other in a consistent and constant basis. They are automatically cast as a lower class, right? And so therefore, the more colonized you are, and therefore the closer to Queen's English that you speak, is the higher of a social class you are able to enter. And that's how we end up with this code switching mess, right? That you get in my own speech.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mine as well.
Yeah. And I know like Kirsten and I know the very first time that we talked about this in our very first book club, if I'm not mistaken, when we were talking about Ray Bearer, Kirsten and I were talking about how when we are in a room with other Trinidadian family members, each Trinidadian that enters the space, we become more and more indecipherable to people who are not Trinidadian.
That is a fact.
and-
I can vouch for it outside of your own individual experience.
Yes.
It's a fact across Trinidadians
Same.
in general.
Exactly.
Once
Exactly.
other
It's a fact.
Trinis come into the space, no one else can understand.
And here's the thing, right? Because you're done living foreign, you can speak as Creole as you blasted once. Because at that point, every other Trini that with you, not judging you on how you speak at that moment, right? Because even if you're talking as wajang as you please, right? Or what we would call wajang here in Trinidad, right? Even if you're talking like that, you don't make it, right? You live in foreign, so it don't matter how you speak it.
That's so wild, yeah.
Am I right though? Tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, you're
No,
right.
you're correct.
We're so
I had a
classist
man.
about that. We're so classist
Yeah.
about that.
I had a man follow me in Barnes and Nobles because he overheard my Trini accent, and he wanted to come find out who I was, what I was doing there, and he just had this whole and I'm like, but it's New York. Like everybody
true,
in
like, of
Trinidad
all
has
the
somebody in New
places-
York.
Like half of New York is Trini, or at least West Indian. Angeli says that because I spoke standard English, which is because she read so much, and she thought in that language rather than in Creole. And I you know what, I'm gonna second that too, because I was trained. I was literally trained out of speaking Creole.
Well, fun story.
And
I
I read so much.
I was
read
talking
so
to my mother about this recently as well, about just language in general, and she was talking about when it was time for them to do SCA, which wasn't SCA at the time, but whatever.
Common
that
Entrance.
yes, the essay portion of that, you were sort of expected to write in standard English. Like you had a Creole option that you could choose if you were like adventurous, but you're expected to write everything ever that you experience in standard English, and it was so frowned upon and sort of like demonized if you tried or attempted to do anything in Creole, which I think is absolutely bullshit. But
I mean, yeah,
It's what
but
it
that's
is.
why so many of us now speak standard English,
standard.
like at a default, right?
yeah,
I was in standard 5, and I remember writing an essay, and I put in the dialogue all year.
I
And
bet you get slapped for that.
listen,
Eh,
listen.
I'm gonna cut
I
out
was
for a
told-
second. I'm getting rained on now. Be right back.
Okay, we'll be back.
All right.
It's all good.
Right. And I think I was marked down for it. I think if my essays were normally getting like 8 and 9 out of 10, or even 10 out of 10 at some point in time, I never got above a 7 after that. It's like, it was so bad, right? It was so bad that I think I was punished in essays that did not contain this, because I think I might have been in my 20s before I even bothered to think about maybe trying to use slang.
Just to interject, and I mean, Angeli's the only one engaging with us, but I can see that there are other people watching. So if you would like to put your 2 cents in, please do, other folks who are watching. But Angeli says, I also loved the shock on people's face in London where they tried to intimidate the Asian woman. And I opened my mouth and the assertive Trini woman came out. Yes, same. I feel like that is experience that several of us have had. And we
I
are
think
like
it's particularly
totally
true because she's a tiny woman as well.
yes.
Because how dare she be tiny and have a backbone and be no. That's too much for them to consider.
All right,
That's too many boxes to tick
we're
off.
taking a beautiful tangent, but I do want to bring it back to the book because I do think because I'm obsessed with this book right now, which I should be, right? Like that's why we're here today. But so when you have that badge of being a token anything, and then you go into a space where you're no longer that, and everybody else is like you're still other, you're still set apart. And that was my personal, and again, this is something we talked about since day one. Several of us have talked about that feeling of because you're able to move between these places, right? That ability to move between places alone sets you apart from all those who can't, who don't, or who haven't. And it's shitty. It's shitty. And I honestly was so pleased to see that experience in this book because it came late. And so by the time we got to that moment, I actually wasn't expecting that we would ever engage with this. Right? By the time, and especially as it's a retelling, there's maybe not necessarily a reason to engage with it. Because you can easily say, well, this is a retelling from the perspective of blah, and then never engage with, oh, that's my cat. And then this is her butt. That's tiramisu. I'm just gonna leave forward.
But
I don't know what.
pretend.
I'm just gonna,
exist.
I'm just gonna try to ignore.
Perch like an owl on your chair. Like, what is happening?
No, this is normal. This is normal behavior.
That's normal.
Yeah, totally normal. Anyway, so I didn't know that we would get this, right? And in part, I decided that I didn't want to assume we would get this because I feel like we always assume that we're going to get this kind of discussion or this kind of talk from books written by people of color. And I think that we don't, even as people of color ourselves, I don't think that we should create that expectation or requirement because sometimes you don't need it. Sometimes you don't have to have it, right? Like in Ray Bearer, I think we didn't really have that. That situation of otherness or othering. And not after not beyond some of the foundational things that were required for her position as royalty, which in itself was a different kind of situation altogether. But I don't think that that's something that we always need to expect or assume that needs to be in books written by people of color or about the experiences of people of color, because some of us don't ever have that. Some of us don't. Some of us are privileged to go through life without ever having to experience that situation of otherness due to our existence as people of color. And then we did get it, and I was actually really pleased with how we got it, because it was written, it was introduced to us in a way that made me feel. It was introduced to us in a way that made me feel closer to the character. And also made me more sympathetic to the character than I was. Because I don't think that Jordan is written as a sympathetic character. I think she's just written as a bad bitch. And that's why we like her. Yeah. Right? Jordan is written as a bad bitch.
An empathetic character because,
I don't even know if I agree with that.
No, I mean, look, it's like...
What you're trying to say is I'm a bad bitch and Jordan's a bad bitch, so...
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's an empathy there. It's like... Bad bitch doing bad bitch things. Yeah, I can get on with this.
Yeah, that's actually
games. Yeah,
that makes sense because that's exactly how I felt about Jordan as well. Because I was like, yeah, okay, bad bitch doing bad bitch things. I could get behind that. That's true. That's exactly my attitude towards Jordan.
Well, you know what it is? She's unapologetic about the space that she keeps and the space that she takes, and I think she pushes the boundaries. But also, in that vein of otherness, she identifies so much as a baker, but then it gets kind of shaken because there's a moment where she's like, no, I was brought here. My family saved me. And they're like, were you stolen? Like, where are your parents? And that was a moment because she thought about it. She never even considered that maybe she wasn't rescued,
Mhm.
and that maybe there
Maybe.
was something else. Like, she's just like, this is my family, this is where I am. And
Mhm.
so there was a moment where she kind of questioned it, or it just became very apparent to her, during
and they kind of sat in that silence of a thing that they both now understood to be something completely different than what she initially believed.
Yeah.
And it really kind of highlights some of that importance of who is telling you the story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It highlights.
Yeah.
That is exactly what I wanted to say.
Yeah, that is crucial to how we understand ourselves and
Yeah.
how we understand the thing is who is feeding us that narrative.
Exactly. And I love the realness of that.
and I like
Yeah.
that
So many
and I-
people of color are stuck with a white narrative and they don't have anything to tell them different. They never, some of them, or some of us, never ever have that opportunity or have the privilege of somebody else coming into our lives and being like, was it though?
Yeah, no one challenging your ideals.
Yeah.
But I like that we also didn't necessarily get a clear answer either. It's like we got the new perspective, but we don't actually know. Maybe she was rescued, maybe she wasn't. But I think it was the fact that it was a moment where the author opened the character's eyes and the reader's eyes, and we just it was a good moment. I remember I was like, oh.
That's what I loved. I think care too about that entire sequence of experiencing her othering and that conversation with what's his name, Ty? Is
Kai.
that Kai?
Yep.
Yeah.
Kai.
Is that it all felt organic. It never felt forced. It never felt superimposed onto, we have to address this thing. It always felt sort of this organic unfolding of obviously this is what's going to happen next. And the fact that we never get pushed for an answer at the end also gives us that feeling of truth, because that's sometimes how it is. You never actually get a finite answer. I mean, the woman who's brought her hair is dead. So there is no finite answer for her. You know what I mean?
But we can
And then,
also
of course, the
make kind of
narrative that her
theme-
grandparents would have fed her would have been the narrative that the woman that brought her there would
I
have
don't even
fed
think that's
them.
necessarily true, because I think that no matter who was telling her that story, as long as it was a white person telling her that story, obviously she was
Yeah.
rescued.
She
You
was
must have been
saved.
rescued because
white
other people
savior.
like you are barbaric.
Yep.
The place that you were born was barbaric and savage. And
Mhm.
anybody who took you out of that horrible place and had milky skin like me must have rescued you, right? Like
Yeah.
that's anybody
The
would have given her that
obvious
narrative.
goodness. Yeah, the obvious goodness of
And
Don't
Anjali
get me
says, "Don't get
started.
me started about missionary schools, huh?" And it's true.
that's where the whole attitude come from.
Yeah.
That's where it come from.
But then there was another like sort of sobering moment as well, when I think it was a little bit before, probably, when she gets to the door and she's so used to being a baker,
Right, and so
baker.
she, yeah,
you know
And when
where
they
I'm going with that.
yeah.
And she's trying to explain, like, I got this invitation, I'm invited, I'm Jordan Baker, and then they just let her in, and she realizes they let her in because of how she looked, because of her face, not because
And
of her
that's the
name.
first time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because she spent this whole time identifying, I am the token. Here's my token badge.
Yep.
Right? You see Baker? That's me. That's me. I am allowed here. Right? And she didn't have to do that for once.
All she needed was her face. That was it.
Yeah.
It really challenges her own value and self-worth and how she's going through
I
the
see a
world.
doggo. Who is this?
It's Beasley, my baby.
Hi Beasley. How are you?
He's like,
I need to move so I can be with pets. I can have pets.
I think you already have 2 pets.
That's
My
right.
human pets.
Yes, your
I
human
think
pets.
they would not appreciate. They would not appreciate being called that. As long as they get all the accoutrements associated with that, like being able to drape over me wherever, whenever I am, however they so fit, So they would not.
I mean,
I just got
appreciate that.
attacked.
They do that already. Like your children are basically cats. They just like have human
with
opposable thumbs.
thumbs.
It makes them 10 times more dangerous. Let's be real. Yeah. Anyway, so we can tell that story later
Yeah.
about how they became cats.
They were born cats. When she went to this place that she had lived all of her life, and a few, miles away, when they went to the store so that she could help a friend during that pretty difficult summer crisis that she had. Aren't you one of those aren't you those people? But they would never do something to get themselves in that.
It was Toy, right? One of the toy girls.
Yeah. And it's like,
Well, she was mistaken a few times.
Yes. And then actually she was mistaken as the toy girl more than once, but then also the
That's because
performers,
all the-
Kai also thought that she was a Chow.
Yeah.
And she was like, you know,
I'm
because
a baker. No.
yeah, and also because you know the Chows were call girls, right?
Yeah.
And so she was so insulted. I can't. Badge. Right? Oh man, that was fantastic though. I love that challenge because throughout the story, and I think this is one of the things that I felt that didn't push me through the first half, the way it pushed me through the second half, is that the first half is much more Great Gatsby oriented and the story of the Great Gatsby, and in the second half, Jordan, the character that we're actually experiencing, that we're actually seeing the story through the eyes of, then that's when Jordan starts to get challenged. That's when Jordan starts to have to deal with the fact that I am a token Asian. I was kidnapped. I've been lied to my whole
Allegedly.
life. I've allegedly kidnapped my ass. We know that she was like, come on.
More than likely.
Allegedly. All right. We've covered. Allegedly.
We know what white people do, okay? They kidnap. They don't ask, they take. Anyway. Allegedly, yes. Okay, fine. Whatever.
According to people of color.
The author never specified. Allegedly.
Sure.
She said according to people of color. I mean, yeah. Yes.
I mean,
it may be a stereotype, but people without color tend to. Yeah, those are my favorite.
This is a great place to tag that TikTok channel.
Oh my god, people without color, just go.
Yeah, the PWCs.
The PWCs.
No, it's a satirical TikTok channel run by two actual people of color.
Oh, okay. It's a vibe.
I will link you. It's fantastic. It's incredibly hilarious.
Like we need like a session just to discuss them. That's it. Just go.
Yeah.
They're the greatest thing ever. Long live the internet. Yeah.
I don't even remember what I was saying.
No, I think you're right, Kay, that the first half was very Gatsby oriented, and the second half is where we start to really live through fully through Jordan's experiences.
Yeah.
And it becomes about Jordan's experiences and not about
the story of Gatsby kind of like through Jordan.
And it does. It continues to like diverge, like even all the way through to the end. And you just kind of like start with like this volume of work that is the Great Gatsby, and then you're just slowly, smoothly
like
transitioning away from it.
It was like exponential curve. It's like slow, and then it's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like, woo.
Like Shayna, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the original narrated by Nick?
Yes.
Right. So there was a certain measure of otherness that he had, but it wasn't all that much other. Because Jay Gatsby was Nick Calloway's Mary Sue. That's who he, longed to be. That's who he aspired to be. This wonderful tragic figure, this wonderful, super rich figure, this man whose money just sprang from nowhere because he didn't see where it came from. And then by flipping the narrator to literally. Allegedly. Right? But by flipping the point of view character to Jordan made this story way more interesting. Because that, again, who that character was based on was one of the girls. And she was one of the more interesting out of the socialites. Right? And then to make her, this other character and just take the same story of otherness and just say, okay, let's just add some layers, and I think that is what took it for me from, it's like the difference between eating frosting versus eating chocolate mousse.
Now I want
right
chocolate
or like
mousse.
I have my period.
We're going to like all
same.
of, like,
I'm gonna just ask Brendan to bring me some.
Just all of the food analogies that ever existed.
all of the indulgence.
But we do that every time, though. Have you noticed that every single time we talk about a book, there is a food analogy, or we talk about some aspect of food from the book?
We talked about plantains a couple times ago, and then
we talked it was plantain in Ribera. I think it was like the importance of things like junk food and how they ate and like canned food and like survival when we talked about marrow thieves.
Right.
I don't think we talked as much about food when we talked about the space between worlds because there was so much other stuff. Honestly, like I don't know if any. I think
We need
Shayna, you
we need a
had
next round to talk about. We need another session to finish talk about
about
the
space between worlds.
We need
It was-
another one.
Jesus,
we do
yeah.
need another one.
I think as much as I loved this book, honestly, and I love Vo's writing, I still think the space between worlds is like my number one of the year so far.
My number one of the past
Jesus.
5 years.
Jesus.
5 years. Past 5 years. You should get it.
I can't remember that. That would be disingenuous of me to say the past 5 years because I don't know if I
No, I
remember
could-
everything I read in the last 5 years. But this book is something that's definitely I think is going to stay with me. I need to update my manuscript wish list now that I think about it because that book needs to be on it. So yeah, but we didn't talk about food as much. We talked about the importance of food, like comfort food, when we were talking about the providers and stuff. But we didn't really talk about food, if I recall correctly. And then we did talk about like the food and the culture around food, and like in a desert versus not in a desert, that kind of thing. When we spoke about, I think, Who Faced Death.
And Jean's death. Remember, he had the restaurant, and the food that she would get would be
Yes,
different
we
from
did
the
talk
food
about that in
everybody-
Space Between
We did
Worlds,
talk
you're
about
right.
that in Space Between Worlds.
Yes, we did. Look at that. See,
Yeah.
every time we talk
It
about
We're
comes
food.
back
hungry. We're
to
hungry
food.
ladies. Hungry ladies.
Yeah, I'm gonna. I don't know,
It's
Brendan.
because
If you're
food-
listening, can you bring me a cupcake from the fridge? Like,
Food,
And like,
food is
hello,
my
ma-
love language. Like I
He
was
knows.
supposed to have,
He
I was
absolutely
supposed to have
knows.
done something for mom, but my back was hurting, and I went to lay down and I fell asleep, and I didn't get the notification that she was coming. So I owe mom food, which is fine. Just means I have to cook for her sometime this week.
Yeah, but when you cook for her, make sure you can cook it so that she can bring for me now.
Send bowls. Just send 2 bowls to me. That's it.
Cool.
That's all I
I
want.
can sort that out. Anyway,
Right. Organize.
food,
Food is my love language.
alcohol, drinks.
I will. Yes. Let's talk alcohol.
No, but let's
No, it's so chosen beautiful.
Chose a beautiful the book.
Let's talk about the alcohol in this
just-
book.
Be tangents, guys.
Oh, something actually on the topic of food and this book. How she didn't recognize most of the food when she went to the restaurant.
Oh, how she described it. Yeah, like stringy things. Like there was she couldn't identify it. And I thought that was
Yeah.
cool.
She couldn't see that it was like noodles or whatever.
It's like stringy things.
Yes, and I was like, it's that looked like
My
tendons, and
mom
I was like,
forgives me.
is she talking about noodles?
Yes.
What is
Yes.
that? And Angeli says that she accepts your apology, but you were also immediately forgiven at the time.
That's why she's the greatest person on the planet,
Yeah.
like ever. Prove me wrong.
So I thought that was another thing that really struck me about the difference, like the difference of that she's experienced, you know, like and that was also something I deeply related to, you know, like you're in a space where everybody else has grown up in the place that you were born, right? Or in the general area, if nothing else. They have the same skills and the same kind of like magic that you have, magic that you can't engage in, that you were not encouraged to engage in or to use, right?
That's
Like
only
that's a
been used
whole
for the benefit of other people.
exactly. You know, you were denied this chance. You were denied the opportunity to use it. You were denied the opportunity, and that's like there's a whole narrative there about how we deny who we are to assimilate, right?
So I wrote down. I wrote
Our
down
whole
like, kind
culture
of
is whitewashed.
through like all of our conversation and stuff. There was a sentence, like, well, actually, a string of sentences that really spoke to me on all of this, right? And I think, you know, just to invoke the author's like just beautiful words a little bit. She wrote like, I had been a delightful pet and mascot. I simply had no place beyond their girlhood days. I existed in a kind of borderland of acceptable and not. Like I had to write that down because like for me growing up, not just as like a person of color, but like being biracial, that's kind of how I felt everywhere that I went. Like whenever I hung out with, you know, my cousins and stuff that were Native American, or whenever I hung out with my friends that were not Native American, you know, like I was always treated as other. And that was something that like I struggled with. I see other people, my family members even struggling with as well. And it's just something that like I think she just kind of nailed that feeling of being other and kind of the isolation that you feel from the rest of the world for being other.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But she does that with so many different lines throughout this book.
Right through. I was reading somewhere and they said that people use communities of color and cultures of color as spare parts. So they'll come in, they'll take what they want for their own benefit. And I mean, you don't maintain what you're using for spare parts. You're not going to do an oil change. You're not going to, clean it. You're not going to like flush your radiators. You're just going to go and take what you want, which may not be these things that require maintenance. And that is what I saw. I didn't see anybody pouring into her. I didn't even see Nick making an effort to be with her, right? Nick would come around when he was
because of what we know about Nick now.
Because of what we know now. But the thing is, like,
But even if we don't, we get there. Even if we didn't know that about Nick, even just his obsession about his obsession of Gatsby. Even in the original telling of the story, you get that sense of like Nick's undying love.
Absolutely.
For Gatsby, you know what I mean?
Right.
He had no eyes for anyone else.
I totally love, though. I probably said this already, like since we've been here, but I absolutely love how completely poly and queer this whole book is. And oh my gosh, did you bring the snacks?
Well,
I got my cupcake, y'all.
Well, what did I send to you earlier today, Kier? I was just like, I need this in my life.
Baby was sleeping.
I needed some Jordan, Gatsby, and Nick action because,
yeah,
they all love each other, so just love each other together.
Yeah,
and that whole wedding ceremony that took place.
Yo,
I loved it.
I will say though,
and they just pushed Tom to the side, right? Because Tom was just stereotypical cis white het racist
like you don't
capitalist.
No. I wanna add a layer to this. We know that Daisy was a shit, but Daisy was also a queer baiting piece of shit. Let's be real.
Yep.
I think Daisy was very much. I did not get the hint at all that Daisy herself was queer. But she was definitely choosing to take advantage.
I'll tell you,
of Jordan and Jordan's queerness.
Daisy needed to be loved. Daisy needed to be adored. She didn't care how it came or who she hurt in the process. She just needed to be adored. And so that's why at the end, when she's like, "But you love me, Jordan," and Jordan's like, the wool's pulled from her eyes, and she's like, "No, Daisy, I don't."
Yeah.
So
I think she did love she loved Daisy, but Daisy didn't love her back. And sometimes you just have to lie and tell somebody you love that you don't love them.
Well, and look, there's nothing wrong, and there's nothing wrong with unrequited love. You can love a friend and not have them love you back in that way, and you can live your lives totally normal. But
Daisy was fully aware that Jordan was in love with her, and that is the problem. Is that Daisy was aware of it and was using it, manipulating Jordan to get what she wanted.
To it.
Yeah,
that was the difference. Entitled to it.
That was the difference. The difference was, like I said, you could be unrequited. It can be fine.
But let's be real here. Is that entitlement not exactly what we talk about when we talk about white women's entitlement?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Also, before she private messages me to say that you're not talking about my comments, Anjali says, maybe please have a book club session on Dune before the release of the Villeneuve movie. Especially from all of us as women, younger and older. Wait, I don't know if this comment was about the Dune movie or something else. About this woman, younger and older. But I'm sure that she will clarify shortly. Because I know that there's a bit of a delay between us talking and then folks seeing and hearing and then folks replying.
Yeah.
So we can give that a sec. But yeah, I think that Daisy is everything that we, and we like not even an hour ago we were talking about white feminism. That's Daisy in a nutshell, right?
Mm-hmm.
She wants what she wants, and she wants all the things that she can get and that she's entitled to.
And the ending illustrates it so well. Oh, when she's trying to tell, like she's trying to hush them, like when they're doing the whole wedding thing. She's like, hush, hush, whatever. when Gatsby gets up and starts saying like she's in love with me, you can kind of see her like shrinking in the back. She's like, wait a minute though, because she wanted her lover, but she wanted her comfy life with her husband who was a cheater. She didn't care because he provided. So it's like when finally her world was challenged.
But then even when
sorry, I didn't actually think you'd stop. Sorry. First, Anjali says yes, she means it in regard to the Dune movie. So just to clarify that, specifically how all the men involved keep highlighting the impact re-adolescent boys stoops. Yeah, my cat wants to play fetch, but I can't play fetch with her right now, so that's the noise you're hearing. And I'm assuming you all are hearing it.
Yeah.
That's loud. I was going to say, Bree, I was going to say that it was more than that than just that Tom provided, but because clearly Gatsby can provide as well, right?
Yeah.
But it was also a matter of
his connections,
prestige. About prestige and roots and history. Right,
old money,
Jordan,
old names.
Yes, exactly. You know, because Gatsby has money, but all he has is money. He doesn't have that old name. He doesn't have those roots and reputation, and that's what she wanted. Because at the end of the day, the money was only part of that status.
Yep.
And that's very much like Daisy and the old
very
Gatsby.
much of that old versus new money kind of theme, and that's very prevalent in the original book as well.
Yeah,
but it just really came down to the fact that she was a garbage person. Because at first you're like, oh, she's just young and naive, and then it comes down to like, well, now you have this boy that you love, or this man that you love, and you're like really into, and it's your unrequited or your like old love. But it's not how much did you really love him though? How much was, if you weren't going to actually run away with him, or you were going to run away with him if Tom was under the guise that you were just like
traveling
with a friend.
Exactly.
Yeah,
My niece.
Like,
hi niece, how are you?
Like if you're out traveling with your boyfriend, now it's a problem.
Exactly.
Can they hear me?
Yes,
we can
we
hear you.
can hear you. Hi.
I agree.
Mushroom, they can hear you
Bree.
too.
It was very much that situation of wanting her cake and wanting to eat it too, having her cake and eating it too.
And what a garbage person she was, because at least Jordan tried to own who she was. She was always a baker. She was always doing what she was doing. She owned who she was. Yeah, you know what? And circling back to Kier's comment about how like polynormative this book was, the two people who were just not open about their feelings were the ones who were the most miserable.
They were the ones most open with their everything else.
Yeah, because you saw Nick who was going between Gatsby and Jordan, and it's delicious. Anyway,
the bisexual representation in this book was fan-fucking-tastic because bi-erasure is real.
But they were all happy. Jordan didn't care. She actually got a little jealous. There was a line that was so juicy, guys, where she's like, and I'll keep it PG, but she says, when Nick came to her and she's like, I hope he brings some of Gatsby, whether it's him on her breath or on his breath or something. I was just like, but anyway, everybody who was polynormative, just open, had a pretty good life. Nick, Gatsby, whatever. But then when people started getting like,
it's that idea of trying to hold on to this identity or hold on to this image of yourself, this pristine, polished version of yourself that is socially
the hypocrisy of Tom, though.
Because what ended everything was the jealousy of Tom, who then went and said, oh, I know who did it, pointed the finger, got somebody else to do the dirty work so he could have his Daisy back to him and only him. He could not share, and it got Gatsby killed. So the moral of the story, everybody, is we should all share.
No, the moral of the story is...
I agree with the moral of that story. I
was having this conversation with my husband, right? And I was joking, and actually we were having the conversation. Julia and I were having a conversation, and we're like, I just don't think that if Miguel walked in on us in a big cuddle pile, he'll have a problem. And I said, no, I think he'd like just tell us, move around, make room for him.
Yeah, like at worst, he'd be like, hey, there's no space for me on the bed. And at best, he'd be like, oh, you want a sandwich or anything? Like anything I could get? I can get all anything. Yeah.
I think Miguel would never ask us what we want to eat. He said, I'm going to make XYZ.
Fair. That's fair.
Right? He will tell you that.
I listened to a discussion the other day about polyamory, and what I found interesting, and I suppose is kind of like some of the crux of what this conversation is as well, is the idea that in polyamory there has to be so much openness and discussion and willingness to discuss, to establish what boundaries are and establish safe spaces. Whereas in those heteronormative relationships, so many things are assumed and so many things go undiscussed that leaves space for so much contention and so much animosity to form between partners, and it's
misunderstandings and then not being able to come and talk about it.
Exactly. And then that forms that sort of secrecy, and that's how those heteronormative relationships fall apart. And so what I love about the concept of polyamory, not so much that I am interested in having several partners, but the premise of open and honest communication that it presents and that it forces in order for people to feel safe and seen.
The thing is, like, again, we had one of the discussions we had before we got married, right? Yes, Miguel is marrying the most beautiful, the most enchanting woman on the face of the planet.
Obviously.
That does not mean, obviously, that does not mean that other beautiful, interesting women don't exist. Like, there are times Miguel will stop and he will turn to me and he will repeat something. So there's something that Miguel will say from time to time, like, is the dirt sterile? You're like, oh. And it harkens back to a conversation that we had when Kay was teaching me about world building, right? Using one of my stories, and she's like, yes, but is the dirt sterile? And he was just
You realize that sentence alone tells nobody anything.
It doesn't matter. The point is, it was a
making
moment.
up things in my mind.
I know. I'm like, what is that?
No, you're not allowed to do it. Fine, I'm going to explain now because it's going to bug me that it's not getting explained. And I appreciate that this is not the space for it, but I'm going to fucking do it anyway.
It's your space. You can do what you want, baby.
That's right. Thank you.
Bad bitch thing.
Thank you. Nicola was talking. God damn it, Talia. I keep using like your other name.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Talia Ishvari is her writer's name. You should look it up if you're watching. It's at Talia Ishvari on Twitter and stuff, right?
Oh, we got a plug.
Go find this lady. I'll type it into the chat in a second. But we were talking about world building because Talia wanted to write a science fiction novel where people who had an attachment to the earth on Earth would take an actual like jar of dirt, Captain Sparrow style, take a jar of dirt with them across the stars to whatever new planet they're going to. And I'm like, that sounds great, but is that dirt sterile? Because, if it's not,
invasive something or other.
And you introduce like this whole, a whole new microbiome.
And
to a new environment. It could be
to this other planet.
And
this other planet might actually like go to shit.
Yeah. And if it has been sterilized, does it carry the spiritual properties or the emotional properties that would make it usable for their rituals? So is it sterile? And if it's been sterilized, is it still dirt? And Miguel wasn't even, I think he was just like walking past or something. This was in the old apartment.
Yeah, he like stopped and he looked at me with his mouth hanging open. And I was like, did something happen?
Let's have a conversation here. Right? Because he was like, okay, so this is my friend Kay, and she's going to be, like, I've heard of world building, but she's going to give me like more of it. She's going to like walk me through some of the things because this is like her forte. And so Kay came over and, and we're talking and then he was like, okay, giving me this space because this is my new friend. He's giving me that space.
That's true.
To interact.
This is very early on in our marriage.
Yeah. And again, so it was that, and like conversations that we had is like, there are things of polyamory that we have adopted. Like, do you find this person attractive? Do you find that, and it's like, I will see someone that I know is his type, so to speak. I'll be like, Miguel. And he would do the same. And there was one time he cheated on me per se because there's this gorgeous woman in this super tiny, super yellow bikini. And I go to point her out to him, and he was staring and he hadn't pointed her out to me. So that was a point of contention that was very upsetting.
I mean,
because I'm a very jealous woman.
I was gonna say, like, I too would be upset. I too would be like, why did you're why are you staring at her all by yourself? Like, we've agreed to share these beautiful moments together.
Exactly.
And you're not sharing it with me. You're just looking without inviting me to look. And I take insult to that. I get it.
And these are conversations that we had, and there's nothing wrong with attraction and so on. And again, people are simply normalizing lying to their partners. Like, look at Tom and Daisy, that they were lies upon lies upon lies, and
it was okay
just,
if it looked okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't okay.
And it wasn't okay because they were clearly upset. They were clearly upset and jealous. They wanted to be able to sleep around and do whatever they wanted to do, but it wasn't fine for the other person to do it as well. Because what upset Daisy wasn't that he had a mistress. It upset her that it got to the gossip pages.
But then it goes to what's more important to you. It was her image.
Exactly. It was
then
her
communication,
image.
Speaking without judgment, listening to your partner. Those things weren't important to her. It was just, what does everybody else think? Instead of what do we think? What do we think?
What
does
is fine
everybody
for
think?
us?
Yeah.
Exactly. And it like that, it highlighted to me that, monogamy can learn a lot from polyamory.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah. So I guess the moral of the story then, because everybody can choose how they want to live, is communicate and speak without judgment and listen without judgment. Listen without taking things personally. If somebody says they find somebody attractive, that doesn't equal they find you unattractive. It's not mutually exclusive. But the problem is people suddenly, they hear what somebody says and they take offense. And it's like, how about you just hear what they're saying for what they're saying?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then talk about it. And if it makes you feel a kind of way, talk about it. Say, hey, but you still find me attractive? Of course. And then you smash it right then and there.
Yeah. And so Anjali says
did none of that.
Exactly. Anjali says how it go look is a whole part of colonial society. Yeah. And I absolutely agree with that. I also am one of those people who advocate. I think that queer and polyamorous is human beings' natural state. I'm not gonna lie. I genuinely think that that's our natural state. And part of my anecdotal proof for this is just the relationships that women have and the relationships that we know are healthier for men, but they are denied from having. They're denied having those kinds of relationships with other men. And that is a whole, but that is a whole different conversation. We have like half hour left. That's another book. Yeah, that's another book for me to read. Yeah.
I mean, in honor of Father's Day, right? Happy Father's Day, Miguel.
Happy Father's Day.
Miguel said something the other day, and it blew my mind. And he said, "Life is not binary." And I looked at him, and he's like, "Yeah, well, if you think about it," and he started to talk about gender and sexuality, and I mean, I had my date sterile moment with my husband, and I'm like. Not because I didn't think that he was capable of that level of nuance, but I appreciated that it came from him. You know what I mean? So yes, life isn't binary. Quote by Miguel Owen.
Well, I mean, he writes as far as I can say.
Yeah, he writes.
I think that's accurate.
He writes.
Yeah. But I loved that deeply about this book. I also noted that as much as Jordan liked and loved women, we didn't actually see a relationship between Jordan and another woman on the page, like clearly the way we saw it with her and Nick. And I thought that was actually like, it was clear that Jordan was into women. It was really clear that she'd had past relationships with women. And that she'd had sexual relationships, not just romantic relationships with women and things like that. It was clear that, because Jordan, I think, was herself a sexual creature. And she embraced that. And I thought that was really, I thought it was interesting, but I also appreciated it because I think, and this is a conversation that I've had multiple times with other women who identify as bi or pan, that we spend a lot of our lives not realizing that our feelings are not heteronormative. I remember having whole arguments with people that no, feeling this way about another woman is a perfectly normal straight thing. It's not. But I didn't know that. Because I also liked men. And it was such a weird thing for me going through this journey of having these feelings about women and feeling like, well, it must be normal because I also like men. So obviously I must be straight. So this is just a thing that other women feel about women, right? Like, this is normal. This is fine. This is normal. Never mind the number of girls that I kissed or the number of girls that I did other things with. That was a totally straight thing. Not a straight thing. But it took me 20 goddamn years to figure that out.
Well, it's so funny. I read a quote somewhere, and I wish I remembered where or who said it, but they said people who identify as bi, if it's a woman identifying as bi, they say they're just confused or they're going through a phase, but that they're straight but confused. And men who are bi, they say, oh, they're gay, they just don't know it yet. And they said basically,
Buy now, gay later was one of my favorite. Yeah.
So they're basically saying that
people don't exist.
Well, the women don't exist. Female relation.
No, wait, not even that. That bisexuality is just looked at from a male heterosexual point of view.
Yeah.
So,
but that's it. That's the core of bi erasure, right? And I, a woman who is most certainly bi, or I think perhaps the word that I think we use now that might be more specific or clear might be pansexual, because I definitely, if anything, I feel like androgynous and non-binary people are even more hot than men or women, right? So, yeah, like, count me in for that. But like, that erasure, like bi erasure, bi pan erasure, is so real that even people who are bi or pan have erased themselves and erased themselves.
Yeah.
And it took me a very, very long time to start engaging with queer spaces as though I were queer, because I felt like I didn't belong there, because I also like men, which is a very straight thing to do, to like men. But I also really like women, which is a very non-straight thing to do. And I also like non-binary people. So like,
so you like people?
Well, yeah, like I like what I like, and
exactly. I like
that has nothing to do with and I mean, liked that.
For me, growing up, it was like I was gonna say, like, for me, like, growing up, like, we were always taught, like, in the Navajo culture, and I know this has been talked about just time and time after again, but I'll mention it here. But for the Navajo culture, like, we believe in having like 4 different genders, and that's, you have like the masculine and the feminine, but then you also have like the feminine masculine and the masculine feminine. And for those that, and I think in a lot of Native cultures they refer to it as being two-spirit, where you kind of embody both sides of like masculine and feminine, as being like those that are actually of a higher power or higher order, because they're people that can embody and embrace both sides of themselves. And even
there's
like in the Navajo
kind of idea in Pacific Island.
And like, it's like everything that we do, it's like our language isn't doesn't have gender in it, but everything that we talk about has elements of both genders in it. So when we talk about things like rainstorms, like there's a masculine rain, there's a feminine rain, but it can be both and stuff. And so that's just how I've been taught since I was little and stuff. And so when issues of sexuality and having all these different labels, like, I never saw a reason for it when we all kind of already embody both. That's how the natural order should be.
I'm also super jealous that I didn't have the privilege of being raised with that, because I would have been much more comfortable in being like, bitch, I like all the things, at a much younger age, right? Like, it would have taken me 20 years. I do want to read what Anjali says. I don't read what Anjali said in chat. The binary outlook is a result to the combination of Euro tribes and the Jewish outlook. That is, if you accept that both Christianity and Islam are outshoots of Judaism. Eastern cultures and American cultures, America's cultures, I guess that would mean indigenous cultures, and African cultures, and Australian/South Pacific cultures existing pre-Euro invasion, almost all recognize more genders. Yeah, I think that's basically exactly what you were just saying, Steinel and Shayna, both of you. Yeah. But to be specific about the book, because that's what I want to keep trying to keep bringing back this. is that I actually really liked that about this book, because I think it's a lot like my own experience, where I obviously had these situationships with women over my time as like a human being. But a lot of my serious relationships have been with men. And so much of that, now I don't think that Jordan denies her sexuality at all in this book. But seeing it represented the way that it was represented, I appreciated that a lot, because, you know, she's clearly in a straight presenting relationship, but is not straight and is unabashedly not straight.
Well, unabashedly, but she still had to hide it. Like, she still had to kind of keep
Yeah, but to be fair, everybody had to hide it, right?
Yeah.
So I will say that, but
And then to marriage, which was a desirable
was
thing,
still a
I mean,
it's
I'll
still a
say you
heteronormative.
had to hide it unless you were in the right spaces for it, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yes, like the what was it? The Cerulean?
The Cerulean,
Yeah,
Gatsby's
Cerulean.
house,
Gatsby's house. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
any big parties.
Yeah. So this whole book was just like by representation, and I love that so much. Or by pan representation.
Yeah, I think what, like, the ideal situation for Jordan, living in a world where hetero marriage is the only marriage recognized, would have been that they would have had another couple that they would have equally loved. And I think had Daisy and Jay gotten married, that would have been like her ideal situation, because she would have had Nick, she would have had Daisy.
Polycule for life.
Polycule for life.
Polycule for life.
And when Jay said, you know, I don't like you, but that doesn't mean, I know you don't like me, but that doesn't mean we can't be friends. No, Jordan said that to Jay, like, just because I don't like you doesn't mean we can't be friends. And it was still a moment, and to me that would have been like, you know, like
Also,
just tolerating Tom.
Can we just, like, forgive me for the sexist phrase, but can we just take a moment to adore the balls on Jordan?
Thank you.
Nobody else would have been able
Yes.
to say the kind of shit that she said to Gatsby.
It's true.
And
Facts.
Gatsby loved her for it though.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
maybe he wasn't like in love with her, wanted to have
Yes.
sex with her, but he was in love with her. He loved her for it. I think of all people in that book, I feel like Jordan made him feel most like a person.
Exactly. Exactly. I was reading this, like, you know, as one does when one forgets that one has something else important to do and gets lost on social media. There was this Tumblr post that I saw on Facebook, and I love how I read so many Tumblr posts not on Tumblr.
Same.
Because there are like other. So I read this on Facebook, and it was about the TV show Merlin. And I wish that I had it in front of me to read it, like, for exactly as it said. But basically, it was that, like, Arthur, the character Arthur in the TV show Merlin, was a total dick, and everybody was like, well, you know, I get it, because he has all this pressure on him, and his dad is a complete asshole, and da da da. So, like, this guy's a dick. But then Merlin joins the picture and is basically Arthur's servant, and Merlin's just like, nah, fam, I ain't doing it. And so Arthur would be like, go do your actual work, go do the things that I employ you to do. And Merlin's like, I don't feel like it. And Arthur can't actually do anything about this. Like Arthur will like spit insults at Merlin's face, and Merlin would just insult him back. And that's what this felt like. That's what this felt like. Like, Gatsby is like, well, you cannot touch me. I am the great Gatsby, right? That's me, right? How can you?
When you're worshipped and you're kind of on a pedestal and nobody ever speaks to you normally, you're just this vision of, you know, when somebody treats you like an actual person, that
It's a
feels
different
good.
thing.
Yeah,
it feels
so it's
good.
like, oh, okay.
That's the whole
I
little
think-
lonely at the top thing, right?
Yeah, I think I liked the relationship between Gatsby and Jordan the most. That was my favorite of them all, because there was so much fire and tension between them, but there was also an understanding, because they both knew what it felt like to be exoticized. Right? They said, oh, he raised his mansion, you know, overnight. And it turned out that no, it wasn't magic, but at the end of, like,
It wasn't
seen
magic.
as
I
this
thought it was
great-
magic.
After he dies, the mansion doesn't go away.
No, they
That-
tear it down.
Yeah.
I
You can
honestly
build-
don't
but
feel
it
like that
doesn't- it
makes it
doesn't-
less magic.
It
No, you
doesn't
can build it with
dissipate.
magic.
Yeah, but that's what they said. That's what was said, that it probably wasn't magic,
Okay,
because.
okay. I see. I see.
Or am I misremembering? I did kind of
This is
read
the
it in
part of
a
the book
rush.
that I have finished yet, so I can't. Like
Right.
I'm not an authority on this part.
But yeah, like I loved it because I saw two people who had been othered, like they weren't each other's home per se, but they were able to just breathe and be people. They didn't have to be,
They took
you
the
know,
masks off.
yeah, they didn't have to be a checklist of demographics interacting with another checklist of demographics. They were just whoever we are when we're not who we are.
Well, because they're both living in a world that they weren't born into. So
Yeah.
it's exhausting wearing a mask.
Mhm.
So pretending to be old money or pretending to deserve to be a baker, even though you were adopted, I think that can become exhausting over time. So for them to just sit down and take a breath and be like, oh, okay, like we could just be.
There's a different
And
kind
what
of
I-
freedom.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
like that the both of them decided, like, you know what, we're also both assholes. Let's just be relaxed assholes for a minute
Yeah.
with each other. I love that.
Yeah, I think there's a magic in that too, right? Because when you have that token feeling, when you're exoticized in that way, in one place, when you go to a place where you're not exotic, you're still carrying the badge, right? Like we said before, you're still carrying the badge of I am a
Yeah.
token, so which means I can move between these spaces. When you're with somebody else, even if it's not the same spaces or it's not the same groups, but they also have that tokenism and that exoticization experience, you can.
You don't have to
There's a
explain
different kind
yourself.
of feeling
Yeah.
seen. There's a different
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah,
feeling seen
exactly.
and understood.
That's
Yeah.
it. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it. Thank you, Seidel. Yeah, you're seen. You're seen, and
Exactly.
you're
'Cause,
you're understood.
For them to
And there
always
was
be
no-
explaining, it's
Sorry.
no,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then they didn't have to be nice to each other just because they were. And so it was like this literal freedom to be
To be
a jerk
yourself.
to the other person. Right? And the two of them just they took it and they reveled in it. And I don't think I'm not too sure if Jordan realized how much she enjoyed riffing off of him. Like that was like a level of creativity that she had that she could get away with because she was a token. But she and Jay, they had this back and forth, and I feel like she enjoyed it without realizing that she enjoyed it. You know what I mean? Which is why I think she had no problem sharing him with Nick. She would have had no problem sharing Daisy with Nick either. With Jay. I said Nick.
Bree has thoughts. Bree.
No,
Yeah.
I just found those scenes so sexy. Like it was just delicious.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
It
Absolutely.
was sexier than the actual sex scenes to me.
Like
Because I
said,
love
that
banter.
line. I'm gonna keep thinking about that line long after I finish the book. Like, what part of Gatsby did Nick just bring to me right now? And I was just like, oh. Anyway. So if the author is listening, you did something to me there.
I can't even laugh or be vexed because
Me and Kier could just sit here. We could be like, yeah, we get it.
we understand.
Totally.
Yeah.
It was good.
No.
It was really good.
Fantastic. I think okay, we have about a little less than 20 minutes left on our clock because I know we try to finish up by 5. So let's do closing thoughts.
Closing thoughts.
Who
I
wants
love
to
it.
go first? I'm going last.
Okay. We
I'm going
want to go
first.
count.
We could do lower.
from the
Yeah, we could do
bottom.
like the
Yeah.
bottom and then the top, or whichever. So I guess that means either way. I think that means Brie or Shayna starts.
I'll go first. Like as someone who's like read The Great Gatsby like several times, like when I think about The Great Gatsby, like I've kind of learned to think about, and we kind of did this a little bit too with some of our previous books. We had to think about the time that it was written and how really truly scandalous it was at the time that it was written. Talking about things about being dishonest or in a relationship where you're not happy, like in a marriage where you're not happy. Those aren't things that you talk about. It's like you don't run off with with like, you know, a previous love of your life. Like that's all just like rooted heavily in fantasy and stuff. But it's something that, you know, certainly hasn't aged well with time. And so for me, I kind of felt like what The Chosen and the Beautiful has done is taken those same themes of, you know, like very deep kind of American culture and brought it into the 21st century. Like I kind of had this thought after I finished reading like the last few pages of the book where I think about, you know, this new story that I've, you know, consumed in a new way, is that now I think about the original story and it feels very two-dimensional to me, you know. And now like reading The Chosen and the Beautiful, I feel like this world has been filled, you know, to where now it feels real, it feels three-dimensional, it feels much more colorful, inclusive. And to me that's where you know we're really elevating a story that is very rooted in American culture, you know, into kind of a more like a more 21st century vibe. And that's what to me made me really appreciate it, is that, you know, I was able to, you know, kind of take some of these newer themes of the American dream and kind of update, you know, this very classic American story. And so I think my last thought that I had on this was like I'll go back to that stupid green light. And I love how it gets mentioned in like one short little line and then just completely thrown away, where we turn back around and we look at Jay Gatsby's house and the changing of it over time, right? And how, you know, I felt like it kind of rewrote the story in that, you know, the original story was very focused on that green light and what it would represent, and that being the American dream, right? And obtaining that American dream. Whereas now we're kind of turning it around and looking at Jay Gatsby's house and about what kind of an America we could have. What's that dream look like? Not dreaming about, you know, what I can achieve as a person, but what can we achieve as a country, as a world, as a society. And you know, I think Jay Gatsby's house and his parties all kind of envelop that, where it's, you know, a more inclusive place, where it's a place where we can all kind of just accept, you know, who we are as people, and you know, find a way where that can exist without it being strange and a place of abnormality, making it more normal. I don't know. Those are my thoughts.
Those were lovely.
That
Maybe
was
you want to go
deep.
next?
Way deeper than what I had in mind.
Well, and I think
I love the original story so much. Sorry,
I can
Brie,
kind
go
of.
ahead.
Oh no, I was.
No.
I can kind of glide with that a little bit and just say, yeah, I think what the author portrayed that I really liked was, well, first of all, the inclusion, and I think we're all going to agree with that, just the inclusion and the representation. But I think there was also another moral or sort of a theme where it's be true to yourself, and when you're not true to yourself, what happens? Because look at Daisy and Tom, who were so involved in what everybody else thought. And instead of just being true to themselves and talking about what was important to them, what they were feeling, what they wanted, if they could have just spoken about what they wanted and owned their truth, then this story wouldn't have been a tragedy, you know. But I think it's a tragedy of truth. You have to have your truth. And then there was another line that I really liked that we haven't touched on, but it was talking about Gatsby. And it was, again, so beautifully written. It was another one of those moments where I'm just like, oh, the author, thank you. Beautiful word, a gift of words. She said, Gatsby's, oh my gosh, hold on, I wrote it down.
I love that we love this writing and the language so much that we don't want to butcher and misquote it in any way.
I don't want to, I don't want to paraphrase. It was talking about Gatsby towards the very end, and it said his only sin was loving her too much. His only sin was in loving her too much. His sin was in only loving her and no one else.
Yes, I didn't get that far. I read that line.
And that's still a little paraphrased. It was written very beautifully, but it was just like, this was his only sin was loving her. And then it's like, but only loving her brought you so much pain. Exactly. Anyway, so I sat with that when I read that. I sat with that for a minute. And then I think the very, 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 very last thing I'll say, and I say it with a little trepidation because it is the ending of the book, but in the original, I won't say too much, but in the original book by F. Scott Fitzgerald, the narrator is Nick. And that is the eyes that we see it through. And in this book, it is obviously Jordan, but there's a moment where we find out who Nick really is.
Can you just like spill it? Like, this is dumb. Just say
No.
it. Say it for the sake of no. Like we make it a rule. No. We make it a rule on this channel that we engage in spoilers, which is why the last time, even though the books, like some of us hadn't finished books in the past, we were like, no, this is fine. Like, this is the agreement, is that we're supposed to finish it by now. So spoilers are fine. I'm gonna read this and love this anyway.
I know. Well, what I'm saying is, irregardless of who he actually was, it doesn't change the point I was gonna make, which was there is a sort of like fading away or I'm gonna say death, but of this person who was the original narrator. So it's almost like he's fading away and Jordan is taking his place. And it's like, this is the Great Gatsby. It's like, it's kind of erasing of Scott Fitzgerald a little bit. I don't know. I thought it was a really cool. Yeah. So like in the original book, you had the green light and the visual and the imagery was the green light. And in here, I think it was the appearance and the disappearance of Nick. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm
Feeling
not
all
interested. Tell me all of the things.
Yeah, tell me all of these
Just
things,
tell me the
goddammit.
things.
Just tell me the things. Is Nick
I-
just the devil? Like, what?
Is Talia gonna kill me if I say it? Talia, don't.
I can't.
No, she's
You're
not.
right there.
Okay,
I'm
here.
not.
He is. He was what's the word? Avatar. He was a paper avatar. He died in a car accident when he didn't go to the wedding of Daisy and Tom. The mysterious person who died was Tom, and she was recreated because we find that Tom actually, not Tom. Nick has I think was it Vietnamese ancestry. He has like just a touch.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
And he was reanimated, and so the whole time she was interacting with who he was in paper form. So,
but who reanimated him?
His grandmother or his aunt or something.
Yeah, his
grandmother.
grandmother.
Okay. So he died on the way to the wedding, and he was reanimated as a paper doll.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then there's a scene where she cuts away his heart. And so when you're reading the blurb to us, and me and Seidel had our moment, it said she can cut the hearts out of men. And then that's what she actually does.
Yeah, I see.
So it was spoiled. But like I wanted it to just. I just wanted for you to have read it, and I wanted to get like a phone call from you.
I was like, wait, did I hear that correctly?
Yeah.
I was like, did I space out for a second and miss something? Like, what am I actually hearing?
He's like, what? No.
So just like to close out my ending thoughts was just. I thought it was just a beautiful way to sort of mirror the original book and be like, okay, no, Nick never was. He never was even I'm the narrator. Jordan, this is my story. And I just thought it was very beautiful. And if the author ever listens to this, like, thank you for your gift of words. They were beautiful.
I literally heard a record scratch when I got to that part. I literally what? No. Like, DJ, bring that back again.
I literally rewound the audio book and I was like, wait, now I have to hear this entirely again. What did I just listen to?
Nice.
Yeah. I had to flip back like a page or so and be like, whoa, wait.
You're like, something happened. It happened too fast. You're like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me
Isn't you have those moments when you're like reading something and you're like, wait, I need to reread that because I feel like I didn't actually read what it said. Yeah.
Because I would have finished this book a little sooner, but because, whatever, I had some stuff going on. I only got around to reading it today. And I ran back. I was like, no. So I went back a little further, and then I went back to where I thought, and then, flipped back to the wedding. I literally went back to read the wedding, and then bookmarked this. And
okay, your turn.
Actually, yeah, technically it is your turn, Talia, so you can close your thoughts.
Oh, no. You finish.
I'm done.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I literally had a record scratch at that moment, right? And there's a point in which the story was a retelling of, it was like, okay, well, this is, same shit, different day, but much better, whatever. And I'm reading it, and But again, it's very beautifully written. And then we get to the parts that, so on. And those two elements just like, she was like, okay, well, Mr. Fitzgerald, sir, this is no longer your story. And that is when,
I know.
but this version of this story, like I mentioned that huge passages are stolen from Zelda's diary, right? And these are all anecdotes with her friends, and these were actually there were paragraphs that were plagiarized, and I just feel that this book is closer to what would have been if Zelda had written the book, right?
Because it's from a woman's perspective.
Not just that, like she was the better writer. His career and productivity went down after she died, despite whatever Ernest Hemingway said. But because he no longer had someone to plagiarize.
To be fair, I also think Vo is a way better writer.
Way better.
Herself.
Way better. Okay, so we're looking at it. We look at the original. The original. I will forever be referring to The Great Gatsby as the original, right? And there's stuff about it that we can pull apart and still see men writing women versus a certain authenticity of its female characters. Versus there are men today that can read Vo's version of it and will not think, oh, well, this is just women writing men and women writing men in a manner that they don't understand men. There's a lot of I think that the men who were written as assholes, they were still written sympathetically. They were still rich characters. Tom wasn't a two-dimensional character either, right? Tom was a whole person, and he was almost like a throwaway character, but that had influence on the story. But the men were well written, which is not something that you get when men write, when with men writing women as a stereotype, And so I really love this book. This book was poetry. This book was like, I think the original was like crackers and cheese, and this was a charcuterie board.
Coming back to food, I love it.
I love it. Yeah,
Holding strong.
Always hungry.
I had a brunch before joining this talk, and I'm like hungry again. Like,
I'm leaving this talk. I'm gonna take my Kindle and I'm going to like be making food while I'm finishing this pasta. Like I'm starving now.
yeah.
But I already know what I'm making for Miguel, so yeah.
All right, Saida.
Yes, these are closing thoughts. So I know we didn't talk a lot about it, and we did a lot of tangents today. But
as always,
I as someone who is very interested in and kind of always been fascinated by the supernatural, there is a sort of I can't say unexplored, but I will use the word unexplored because I don't have a better one right now. Found through line.
There's that like a layer of a cult here that we don't get to engage with because that's not what these stories about.
Yes, but what we do get to see of it is very interesting to me, and how it is kind of paralleled onto what the idea of in spiritual realms, what the idea of New York represents, and how that's paralleled. I think is very interesting and very rich. And even though we don't get to see a lot of it, what I do get to see of it was just very, I don't have another word, interesting for it right now. It was definitely an element of this storytelling that I definitely enjoyed, and that I don't have better words to make the sentence that I want to make just yet about
Use
that.
the words you have.
Overall, completely enjoyed the storytelling, enjoyed her writing, her lyricism was good. Just really good, and I really enjoyed the how easily we were able to explore Jordan's sexuality. So the kind of trope of the Asian woman as being sort of non-sexual at all. And this kind of, I don't know what the word is, but this having that disregarded in this story and explored and unabashedly so was very interesting and freeing and liberating for me as a reader to remember that, oh yeah, like she's a woman, so she's going to have desires and feelings that like any other woman would. And so I suppose that also kind of reveals some of my own buying into certain stereotypes. But this was a beautiful, refreshing reminder that, oh yeah, women are women who have feelings and emotions and urges and sexual tendencies and preferences and whatever. And we got to explore all of those things. And I really enjoyed that part of the storytelling. Like I said, I've never read the original Gatsby, so I have no comparison outside of like the film with Leonardo DiCaprio. But even this version of that story, even this version of the Gatsby, I just found so much more interesting. I found so much more meat in this man who wasn't even really interested in Daisy, but was interested in the idea of possessing her. Was just,
I think it was the White Knight. It was just like the fairy tale. He's like, oh, I need to rescue you and you need to be my princess. And
and he had to have it scripted too, right? Like he had their meeting scripted.
Expectations.
Yeah, that's like to him winning Daisy was the only conclusion to his rags to riches story.
What
it was the only
get there?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. It's that idea of what happens after and they lived happily ever after. Okay, and then what next? And then what next? Like, what happens at the day after you live happily ever after when you get up in the morning and you're stuck with this person?
They both get lovers.
I love too that it was so clear that his plan or his end goal was always Daisy, because Daisy had a suite in his house. Mm-hmm. Daisy had a suite in his house. Like, let's just not forget this. Like, this was clearly, that was the plan. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Zaida.
Yeah. No, and a much better suite, apparently, than Gatsby even gave himself.
You're absolutely fine, Kay. So I definitely enjoyed listening to this book. I definitely, like I said, there is an unexplored supernatural world that I am very interested. Like, I want to listen to this again, just for focusing on that part of the story. Yes.
I have a question. Who is the voice actor or actress for this?
I don't know actually.
I'll look it up.
Okay, thank you.
It was read really well.
It was read very well.
Yeah. I remember you guys saying that. Like, I'll give audiobooks a shot, but it has to be like,
I was hesitant going back into this one, but it was good. I will give her that. It was good. And then again, just to kind of piggyback off of Bree about challenging those ideas of what relationship should be and what communication should be and what honesty can do for a relationship. I think was some of the underlying just how dangerous it is, especially in that sort of like white upper class, how important that veneer is to maintain and how actually and truly volatile and dangerous that veneer is to the truth of a relationship and to the health of a relationship. I think, and how privileged it is to be able to, how much of a privilege it is to be able to try and have to uphold those things. I wanted to say this a long time ago and I kept not remembering. What I enjoyed as well about it is part of the reason that people like Jordan had the freedom to explore her sexuality at all and be open about that was because she was not burdened by the idea of this person that she had to uphold. She wasn't burdened by the vision of this person that she had to uphold. She wasn't chained to that. And that is something that the upper white class is so very attached to and so very chained to. And they don't even realize that it's burdening them in this very disgusting and terrible way. And if they would only be okay with anything other, if they would only be okay with anything outside of their binary, how much more rich and colorful and beautiful the world could be.
Expectations ruin things. A word I use is kind of like a curse word I say is should.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be anything. You should just be what you are. So adding should adds an expectation. And I think this book just illustrated that beautifully. Daisy should have been. And I think Jordan, while being seen, also was able to kind of move unseen because she didn't have those expectations necessarily. She was unmarried still.
Mm-hmm.
She was kind of pursuing a career as an athlete. So while she was a baker, maybe she still wasn't upheld to the expectations that Daisy was.
And her outward appearance was a part of that, right? Her ethnic or racial background is a part of that. What is it? Are you done?
Yes, I'm done. I'm done.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm so
No. Do not apologize.
Go
Do not
for it.
apologize at all. I just want to make sure that you are before I jump in because I don't want to cut you off. I actually want to start somewhere, the same things that you did with this, with the thread of supernatural, with the fantasy part of the story. This is a lesson in how you can write fantasy without fantasy, if this makes sense. Because a lot of fantasy out there, the fantasy is an in-your-face fantasy. Yeah? Your goal here is about world building. You place emphasis on magic and magic systems and how it works and what it means to be a magician or not a magician, to be a mage or not a mage, to be a sorcerer or a wizard. Like the main character often engages with magic in a certain way. Like in so much fantasy, it's about the fantasy. It's about that magic element, right? Where magic is the element of fantasy. And this was not one of those things. This was not one of those things. Magic exists, and this is the system that it exists. This is just part of the world. The story is not about the magic. The story is not about any of that. The story is this story, right? And does Jordan have a finger in that pie? Sure. But that's not what this is about, right? And I think that's an incredible lesson as a writer, reading another writer's work. There's an element of being able to pull craft through that I don't know if I could get away with, right? Certainly. And I think that maybe she couldn't have gotten away with it either if she wasn't already so well loved and her writing wasn't, as brilliant in this field. Because, this is her debut novel, but she's not an unknown. And she's lauded for the work that is out there. Because I felt reading the very beginning, like the magic in the very beginning was not grounded at all. This idea of how they cracked open this thing and they were floating and it clearly introduces us to the fact that this is a fantastical world. There is a magic element, but we don't experience as a reader any further grounding than that. Then this exists, and it's just a thing that exists. Yeah. And I know that it's hard to get away with that. In fact, I've had manuscript reviews at this point where people are like, well, you need to ground the reader in X, Y, and Z a little more. And I'm like, yeah, but this is told from first person. This person isn't going to think about all of these things. How do you want me to ground a reader in something that the perspective doesn't need grounding in? Right,
or that the narrator is now discovering and therefore hasn't grounded themselves.
And therefore,
it's
also confused.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
and I'm not
just
saying it can't be done.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it can't be done, but I'm saying that is something that I have to engage with as a writer. And I mean, I'm not saying that Vo didn't engage with it either. I'm just saying that this was her way of helping us to understand. Yes, this is fantasy, but also this book is not about this is not about the magic. This book is not about the magic.
The magic was not a character.
Yes, which in a lot of fantasy it is. Right? In a lot of fantasy it is. And I enjoyed that a lot. I enjoyed that a lot. A lot.
Yeah, I think Jordan's story didn't depend on how well she could do magic.
Yes. Or about her learning magic. And even the magic was a symbol of identity and past and and heritage. It was not necessarily, you could take the magic out and I think that the story would still work.
Absolutely.
And that's incredible. Because there are a lot of stories where you can't necessarily do that. And so there's that. There's also, pardon me, I also think that this is, and I think Sheena, you said this specifically about bringing all of the lessons that there are to this to the forefront, to a modern perspective. And again, I think that was really incredibly done, really brilliantly done, because as much as she brings this entire narrative to a more modern perspective where we can relate a little more deeply to the narrator and to what's happening as modern women, yet it was still set in the 1920s, and clearly set in the 1920s, without, I think, really breaking the mold of the 1920s outside of that fantasy element. Again, masterfully done. It was so incredible. And I think that her style of writing definitely is one of my favorite things about this book. Just that lyricism and just that, the incredible beauty of her sentences. Her sentences are so beautiful. Her structures, everything is so nice, and the way the word choice that she uses to describe certain things is really incredible. And I know that I have highlighted some passages in the Kindle, but I'm not going to go to it right now because we're already past 5. But just
I think I actually wrote down more quotes from this book than any of the other books that we've read.
Just so well, they just sound beautiful. They just sound beautiful.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I learned, I think, a lot reading this book, as I have, I think, reading anything else that she's written. I learned so much about craft just reading her work, reading this book. And I'm developing a bit of an obsession with retellings, specifically because I'm working myself up to a retelling of my own. I've wanted for a very long time to do a modern retelling of the Ramayana.
Nice.
Which I've been... And y'all all know Brendan personally, except maybe I think Bree. You can ask him. I've literally been talking about this for years. My mom too probably knows. Angeli probably knows that I've been talking about this for years, and I have some ideas. And so I have this bit of an obsession about retellings, and I feel like that this is such an incredible example of taking a retelling and making it its own. There are retellings out there that don't claim the story as their own.
They're like karaoke versions of the original.
So the door opened and I thought it was my husband, but it was just a cat. Who knew? I did. The cats actually do that all the time. I should have known. Anyway, but okay, to wrap up all of the things, because there's still so much that I want to say, and I think so much that can be said about this book. I adored the queer representation in this book. I think perhaps more than anything else, possibly more than... It's hard. It's a fine line, right, between what I adored most and what I adored just less than most, because it's like so close. But I think the queer representation was perhaps my favorite thing, because I've read sapphic books where it's women and women only, and I've read heterosexual books, and I've read other or books where there are queer people, but the relationship isn't so clearly, or the representation of the person isn't so clearly like bi or pan, right? And that's not something that I get often. Like, I've definitely read books where the character was bi, and yes, I knew the character was bi, and I enjoyed the representation of that character. But there was something about the way it was done in this book that really goes beyond, for me, what I have already read. And I think I liked that perhaps the most. And that's like a millimeter more than I like everything else in this book. And I was so impressed. It's so impressive that a writer could take something that's otherwise so boring to me and turn it into something so fabulous. And I mean, Shane, I know that you love it, but I think we also know that we have as different tastes as much as we have as similar tastes. So yeah.
It's true. It's true. And again, I hated this book the first time I read it when I was forced to read it for high school, and then I don't know, I went back and read it again. I was like, no, this is definitely, there's more to this than is on the surface of it. And this book kind of showed me just how much it pales in comparison when you actually have, when you change that perspective and you do have it come from a woman. Because there are a lot of elements to the original novel where I'm I really wish, that this was expanded upon, or maybe because I remember reading, the second or the third time reading it, and I kept wondering more and more about Jordan Baker as a character and why, she wasn't expanded upon more. And that was probably like the first thing I loved about this book, was that it was from Jordan's perspective, and we got to learn more about her. And yeah, anyways, it was I could go on and on, but yeah, it's just this
and there are
is
things, there are
so much
definitely
better than
things.
the original.
Yes, and there are things I think in this book too. Brie, is that Natalia Notice?
Oh yeah, that's the
Natalie
actor.
Notice is
Natalie.
the voice of the audiobook.
Nice.
Natalie.
Excellent job, Natalie.
Naudas. I think that's it. I mean, there's a lot more we could say. There's a lot more I think we could talk about in terms of the representations with Tom and Daisy, the multitudes of representations that we experience in Nick and Jordan, and in all parts of this book, like in the Cerulean and in the lyric even, and all of those other things, all of those places, and kind of what we discover from them. But we're out of time. So everyone, for those who listen, thank you for listening. If you're looking at this from the future, I hope that if you haven't read this book yet, you do, because it's fantabulous. And join us in 2 weeks, or I think that's going to be the 4th of July, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so on the 4th of July, we'll be reading Seidel's pick, Till the Well Runs Dry, by Lauren Francis Sharma. And if I'm not mistaken, Lauren Francis Sharma is Trinidadian, right? Yeah,
I've not read the book either, but it was a recommendation, so I'm like, okay, I'll add it.
Okay, cool.
I'm excited to read the book.
So I'm excited to read this as well. I think this is literary fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so it may be a little different to what we've read before, because I think for the most part we've read books that are generally considered like genre fiction and not lit fic. So this is interesting. I think a lot of literature that comes out of the Caribbean is lit fic. And I'm excited to read this.
Yeah, a lot of literature that comes from the Caribbean that is sold.
That is sold or celebrated. Yes, it's lit fic. That's a very good point.
We had that conversation when we did 15 Dogs.
It's true. It's true. We did. So I'm really excited to read this, and I have no idea what it's about. And that's it. Well, Olia, join us on the 4th of July for our discussion on Till the Well Runs Dry. And until then, enjoy the rest of your life. Where's the button? I gotta end. Okay, bye.
Bye.